Earlier today on email that had last week's slides in it. So again, if you want those and you did not get it, it probably means you need to make sure that your account with the church has an email address attached or something like that to it. If you need help, you could probably call the church office and get Kelly's help or something with that. But if you want those slides or my emails, then and you didn't get them, then you can do that. I did mention when I sent out the email today with the slides from last week that tonight we're going to finish up the book and story of Joshua and then begin our time looking at the Judges and the book of Judges. So let's see here. Last week we ended with the video that kind of broke down or at least portrayed the story, part of Joshua's story having to do with the conquering or destruction of Jericho. I put this slide in again this week just to keep these places in mind. Again, this is the slide that we originally had 2 summers ago when we were going through Genesis. Just making the authors are going to be making the comparisons here between Abraham, Jacob, and now Joshua. So keep in mind these cities. You're going to see all 3 of these, or all 4 of these, I guess, tonight: Shechem, Bethel, and Ai, and then the Negev. Again, drawing the story of Joshua into a comparison with or parallel with Abraham and Jacob. So again, we talked about how Joshua and Moses their stories are compared and equated in a lot of ways, but in many ways they're different. And again, this picture I always put in to remind us that Joshua, unlike Moses, is a military leader. Moses was a spiritual leader, political leader, and Joshua certainly, operates in some of those ways as well. But primarily, Joshua here, in his capacity, is a military leader. And so we looked at the story of them crossing the Jordan on dry ground. The priests go out before them. Here's another picture of that. They came in from the plains of Moab, where Moses had given his farewell address to them. They crossed the river Jordan there right in the middle, and then that arrow on the far left leading to the area of Gilgal where they camped, and then the city of Jericho. And they came across the Jordan there and went and destroyed Jericho. And just as a reminder of that, in Joshua chapter 6, it said, "The Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days.'" So they march around. They're silent in those 6 days. Then on the 7th day, they march around 7 times. They have the priests go out before them. The priests are carrying the ark around the city. That is to show that this is God's battle. This is God's victory. And the priests are the ones carrying the Ark of the Covenant as was required of them. Verse 21 says, "They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men, women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys." So we had talked about the story of Rahab. The 2 spies are sent out before to come into the city. They meet with Rahab. We're going to come back to her story tonight, but here again is the portrayal of on the 7th day marching around the city, blowing the horns. These are like the shofar, the ram's horn that they would have blown here, that are used for ceremony or religious ceremonies, of which this would have been one before the battle or before the destruction here. And then again, both of these pictures you can kind of see when the walls are tumbling down. You can see in both pictures kind of that red cord, that red scarf kind of thing coming out of the window, and that's the one part of the city there, the city walls, that is not tumbling down, not being destroyed. Obviously meant to signify this is Rahab's house that was in the city walls or between the city walls. And again, that red cord, that word there, symbolizing hope. And then again, the picture, here's one of just Rahab looking down into the city. In verse 21 there, though, when it says, "They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys." So the word there used there is harem. It'll be on the screen a little bit later if you want to write it down or look it up. But harem is something we've often translated as like the ban, or sometimes destruction. But here you can see that it's translated as devoted. They devoted everything. They devoted the city to the Lord and then destroyed with the sword every living thing in it. This is one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to see this a bunch of times, of this destroying of cities, the annihilation of a whole people group, and we're going to circle back and talk about what that means and how to grapple with it and deal with it. You know, as we talked about week 1 with Jacob wrestling with God, we'll wrestle with Scripture in that regard of what are we to do with these kinds of stories. Beginning here with Jericho, where they go in and harem, the ban, they destroyed the entire city and annihilated every living thing in it. So again, we're going to come back to that idea tonight. And then verse 22, Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with your oath to her." So they had made the promise to her, and so Joshua is fulfilling that, the promise that the 2 spies had made to her. And then again, verse 24, "Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all belonged to her, because she had hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day." It's an interesting little note there. I mentioned last week that